Asake Online. Welcome to Agriculture on Site. I'm your host, Busani Bafana. Today we are learning about silage making, baling, as well as pasture development. Let's hear more.
Meet Mr. Chinhamo Obert at Biano Farm in Escodini. We are breeding Siemental cattle and Simbra cattle, and we happy to show you what we're doing here, which is mainly breeding of these cattle and doing what we should do to keep them alive.
An interesting thing that farmers, in keeping cattle alive, a key factor is being able to prepare the feed for the animals. You are breeding a pedigree, animal is Simmental. Tell us more about how do you prepare baling?
Yeah, what we do is, like I said, the key issue in keeping these animals alive is the amount of effort that every farmer, I should say, should put behind whatever you do with your livestock, be it sheep, goats, donkeys, cattle, chickens. For them to be productive, they need to have good nutrition. So on this farm, what we do, to support those programs, we do a lot of work on silage making, and then we do a lot of work on baling, and then we do a lot of work on pasture development. So those three are key to our operations.
Why so?
Because we understand that winter comes every other single year. I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. A lot of farmers relax when the rains come because it's green, the cattle are getting a lot of lush green from outside the pastures and all that. But as soon as winter sets in, autumn, you start to see your crops or your grasses drying, and there's no nutrition in the grasses that are dry. So as a result, as you get into winter, you start to get a loss on the weight of cattle. So as a management tool, I think it's important to advise each other that we need to be weighing our cattle like every month if we can. So we see whether they're maintaining weight or they're losing weight or they're gaining weight. So as a management tool, it helps us to understand what to do when. So in terms of interventions, I'm talking about interventions because as soon as you start to get your weights coming down, it means your cattle are losing weight, and it's a clear indicator that you, as a human being, you must start to intervene. So this is where these programs come in. We do our silage from fodder crops like maize, sorghum, velvet bean, leb, sunham, any fodder crops, even green grass, you can make silage from there. So as that's banking for winter, it's a bank. We're creating a bank or a reserve for winter where we then intervene when we start to see those weight losses or animals not gaining weight anymore. Then we intervene.
When do you start preparing silage?
As soon as the rains come, because we're talking about crops that we are planting in the fields. When it rains, we go in the fields, we plant our maize, we plant our sorghum. We're doing it dryland, we're not irrigating anything. So it's dryland crops that we are talking about. So from our experience, our head here is we run about between 250, 300 head of cattle at any given time. Maximum, we don't go over 300. Why? Because we're running on small land. Our land is just 80 hectares, like I've always said here. So we try to produce as much as we can on the 80 hectares and be as intensive as we can. So away from the silage that we're talking about, we also do a lot of baling. So we plant pastures, which we bale. And then we go out to other farms where we get grass to bale. We've got contracts with other farmers where we bale and get a certain percentage, they get a certain percentage. But that helps us, our operations, to have reserves on pastures also.
What pastures are actually ideal, for a baling? Can farmers just use any Why would I call it ordinary grass?
I think the cattle when they graze in the paddock, they are eating the same ordinary bush grass, which is fine. It's okay for farmers to improve the pastures if they can. Like I said, here we mainly do a lot of work with on pasture development. So pasture development means we are developing the ordinary bush grass and replacing it with pastures with like crude protein content or nutritional value, should I say, because the grasses all will have a nutritional value. Now, when you're looking at the nutritional value of these grasses, it differs from grass to grass, from grass species to grass species. So we try and bring in grasses like Rhodes grass, which is your Catambora, and we're doing a lot of work with Catambora down on this farm. So I think at the moment we've converted our farm, 40 hectares of our 80 hectares is converted into a pasture. And what bales you see here around the farm is all out of our planted pastures. Now this pasture, we bale it green, we cut it green, we allow it to dry a bit before we bale it so that it doesn't mold. If you bale it wet, it's going to mold. So we allow it to dry, then we bale it. And then if you test the crude protein content in there, is between 9.5% and 11%, which is very good for a dried grass. Now, if you test the ordinary bush grass, the crude protein is probably, when it's dry, is probably 4.5%, 5%, which is quite low. You need to add a lot of other ingredients to up the crude protein. Protein supplement is very important in winter because all the grass in the pastures have lost the protein value as they dry out.
What would be the good time for a farmer, in fact, to start baling, so that they know that the feed is actually has the right protein content, as you say?
In Matabeleland, it's one of the best regions to be baling because our rains are not that incessant. You don't get a lot of rain over long periods of time. There is nothing like that. So we work with the weather forecast people. We listen to the weather forecast all the time. So my advice is, when you've got good dry windows of like 2.5, 3 weeks, you can cut your grass in February and still bale it before the next rain pattern comes. Because what happens is you want to have enough time to cut, get it to dry, and bale it before the next rains. So it's important to work with the weather people, understand your weather patterns in your area. So we started baling in mid-February when we had those dry windows. So most of the grasses we cut in February is the places where we are grazing today. If you look at the cattle, the other side there, those cattle, we already baled those pastures there. But because we baled in February, the rains came and the pastures grew again, and now we're grazing the same pastures.
A lot of machinery involved in actually doing baling, where a farmer can merely just cut the grass.
I would recommend, if you don't have the equipment, I would recommend that farmers maybe even use brush cutters and make silage out of the grass rather than worry about baling. If you can't bale, just make silage out of the green grass. We must take advantage of the green grass and preserve it green, because that is silage. Silage is a very simple anaerobic process where you just don't want air in the preserved product. It's anaerobic. You remember in school we did aerobic, anaerobic. So a good example of aerobic is when you make compost, because it's in the presence of air. Anaerobic is silage you make in the absence of air. So it's very simple. So I think farmers can learn how to do just a simple small pit and make their silage, which will help them a lot. Come August, September, October, those are the most difficult months in Zimbabwe, as far as my experience is concerned. Most farmers, we get a lot of poverty deaths. I'm sure you, as an expert, would go to veterinary people, veterinarians, ask them, get statistics of how many cattle die from poverty deaths, which is hunger. in any province every other year. You'll see the losses are so much, but we can try and work the other way around and preserve food for our cattle and be able to reduce those numbers.
But we've seen that we've had a lot of drought spells. I think in the last 3-4 years, we've had continuous droughts, particularly here in Zimbabwe and the rest of Southern Africa. So farmers really be prepared.
What we are trying to teach people, remember we do field days here every year, and we're trying to show farmers how we do it here at Biano Farm. It's one of those things that we would really be happy to see a lot of farmers trying to do what we do, because we're stowing hay, we're stowing silage, we're doing pasture development, and you can see our cattle. You're looking at our cattle, you can see what they look like. Now, if you come out of the farm and look at other herds and try to compare and see what we do. So it's very important for farmers to understand that we need to be doing or working better and harder for our cattle. Land will never grow. That's one thing one message I want to put across. Our land will never grow. Zimbabwe will remain the same hectarage, whether in 1,000,000 years you can't change this, the square kilometers that we cover as a country. And the population is growing. So the more we start to go intensive today, the better, because we know the population is growing. And as it grows, a lot of people still want to farm on the same land. So if we go intensive today, it means we're teaching our children the right thing to go intensive and understand that we can produce so much on small land and be able to export whatever we do.
You have in fact gone intensive in your farm, as you say. I'm keen to then to understand when you talk about pasture development, what is involved and how can farmers really invest in the development of their pastures.
Pasture development is just about, in my opinion, is about changing the ordinary grass that we have on our farms. Maybe just do 2, 3, 4 hectares every year of a better pasture, a better pasture that you're growing, so that you can feed your cattle in the bad times, because these grasses bring value to the feeding that we do on our cattle. So pasture development to me is one key area as a country that we need to be looking at and working harder to see a lot of pastures changing. I think if you go to countries in abroad, overseas, like in Europe, you'll find there is mostly maybe common pastures that you find, because they've seen the pastures that give them what they want in terms of crude protein, energy, minerals and vitamins and whatever we would add, like in fertilizers, just to make sure we also get those minerals, should be on the good grasses that give us the volume, because it's not just about a good grass. It's about a good grass that gives you the volume. This is why I'm talking about Katambora in this case. In Zimbabwe, I strongly recommend Katambora because Rhodes grass is a local grass. It's been developed elsewhere by people who took our seed to wherever they took it and developed it. But if we plant that grass, it's doing very well on dry land here in Matabeleland. We are in Matabeleland here, the driest parts of Zimbabwe, and we are doing our pastures nicely. We are winning. These pastures that I'm talking about is all dry land, not irrigated. So if they are doing well here, they would still do well in Beitbridge or anywhere in Plumtree, anywhere in the country. In Mashonaland, we don't talk because that's where a lot of it is. You know, it's also used as a rotation grass for tobacco guys. So the tobacco farmers already have plenty of it in Mashonaland. So we brought our seed from Mashonaland and we've planted here, and it's doing very well. So I think everybody else can try it on their farm. It's dry land, we are not irrigating it. So I guess it's worth investing in Katambora seed and doing a lot. We also help a lot of farmers who buy seed from us because we harvest the seed already here locally. The one that's already working in Matabeleland, we've got the seed. So we can help farmers who want to do that pasture on their farms.
So it sounds very simple that you're taking a local grass, as you say, the rose grass, and then using that, to actually grow it actually in the pastures. Apart from that, can farmers use anything else? And what also does it take, to bring up, that grass to maturity? Should farmers, grow it like they would grow their crops?
Yeah, pastures. I think I've seen a guy called Alan York. I think he's Alan York. He farms in Mashonaland, somewhere Mazoe area. What he does, he mixes. We've tried to do it also this last year, where we're mixing sugar grass, velvet leb, and Katambora and Sudan sorghum. So those the Sudan sorghum and the Katambora are grasses, and then we're bringing in the legumes, which is your velvet leb. Those are legumes. So when you mix them with your sugar grass, which is a sorghum also, you are trying to get a combination pasture, which is bringing you a lot of value. So we harvested a combination of that, and we took and made it silage. So we took our sample of the silage to a lab, and it was tested in a lab at 5 So the lab results show us that we have got 17.9% crude protein. So in other words, we are sitting on a concentrate, which is it's a concentrate, because we want it to be a 12.5, 13%. So our crude protein is a lot higher than where it should be. But it's because of the combinations that we are doing. So even when you graze it, you're still going to graze and get the same value from grazing. So I think it's important for farmers to understand that you can work with combination pastures so that you get value from the pasture, not just one pasture. So for example, you can put Sanem in the combinations that I'm talking about. Sanem, you can plant it even with Rhodes grass or banana grass or other grasses. But it's important for farmers to understand we just need to work and do that. It's not a game where things happen on their own. If we decide to be farmers, let's be farmers. Let's work for our livestock. Let's make sure we are getting value for the land, for our animals as well.
Many a time, isn't it that farmers have been reluctant to really grow, as the pastures, for their animals, banking on that at certain seasons you don't need to feed your animals continuously. And does this still hold true?
Like I said, the farmers you're talking about, we're farming with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 hectares, one person. In Zimbabwe, I don't think the model still works. You don't need that model in Zimbabwe. You need a model that makes people have less land, be productive on less land, evaluate what they're doing, and make sure we're utilizing our land to the maximum. And then can we see agriculture grow, to greater heights? We can still export anything from maize, sorghum, livestock, cattle meat. We can still do the exports, but we need to work for us to be able to achieve that. It doesn't come easy. It's a lot of hard work.
What has it taken for you to actually promote intensification on your farm? How did you actually start?
We've seen a lot of people, especially the former land owners, pre-land reform. If you move on any farm, you will find there's a silage pit there. So that tells you what the people have been doing on the farms. And the few that are still left on the farms are still doing silage today. And I work a lot with the dairy people. If you want to understand how you should produce or be productive on your farm, visit dairy farms. Those people don't sleep. They must produce milk, and they make money from the milk, not from the cattle. So if you work with those people, they understand what nutrition means to production. So the same applies to the beef guy or a goat guy or sheep guy. Nutrition means a lot to your production, because there is no way you're going to get calves like this when your cattle don't have good nutrition. you need your cows to give you a calf in at least 400 days. 400 days. So if you're getting a calf every 400 days, you are in production. But if you're getting a calf every 700 days, you are not in production. You can see what I'm talking about. So we need to try and work towards being intensive, produce a lot of food for these cattle, and they will in turn produce a lot of cows for us. So we can grow the national herd. We can look at some good cattle like what you see here. These are good cattle, believe me. These winners these are born November last year. They're weighing over 300 kgs. So it tells you what sort of production we're having here.
You breed Simmental.
Yes.
What's important, what's special about this breed, and why did you choose, to actually go into breeding Simmental?
Simmental is a dual-purpose animal. And, in terms of production, it's probably the most productive animal that I've seen around the world, not around the country. These animals' fertility is quite very high, because when you're talking breeding, anybody who knows about breeding, the number one trait that we talk about is fertility. So most Simmental herds across the world, you can check on Google, evaluate and see the intercalving periods of the herds across the world. You will see that Simmental are among the top performers. That's one. And then when it comes to conversion of the feed, that when you're feeding these animals, for every 12 kgs of food they eat, balanced food, we're talking about, for example, pen feeding meal or whatever, this good silage that we make here, they will eat your 12 kgs of silage and probably give you 3 kgs of beef every single day. So that's a huge plus when you're talking about comparing with other breeds, because the one breed will eat 12 kgs and give you 500 grams, 600 grams. So, the advantage that then these other breeders get from us is the hybrid vigor they get from using our bulls to cross with their heads. What I'm talking about here is then multiplied in other heads just by using Simmental bulls, because 50% of the progeny is already Simmental blood. So if it's a heifer, it's got better milk than its mother, it's got better beef than its mother, and all that counts big. So Simmental, it's like I'm saying, you can choose to either run a beef head with them or a dairy head, because they're dual purpose. So it's one of those animals that will do very well for anybody, anyway.
Passion being, I think, the main ingredient, as it were. And no doubt farmers would also be interested in profitability, on such a venture, particularly where you're doing stud, breeds. What are the main really advantages really of breeding?
I hope a lot of people will listen carefully to what I'm going to say now. Pre-land reform, the records you can check with ZHB, because the records are there at ZHB. We had all breeds were here in Zimbabwe, represented the Angus, the Herefords, the Charolais. I remember Dala Ngenisa, Ngenisa Twyman Spanda. He used to breed Charolais here in Skodini. I'm talking about Skodini. And then, limousines, all those breeds, they thrived across the length and breadth of this country. Now, come land reform, the people that owned those countries are the people that lost the land. So what they did is they sent the cattle to slaughter, because they didn't have any way to keep them, and they didn't want to give them to you for free. So what they did, they sent to slaughter, to the slaughterhouses. All the abattoirs were busy killing those animals. And when they slaughtered those animals, here is an opportunity for you and me. They've created a huge gap, genetic deficiency. We don't have certain breeds in the country today. Like, for example, you talk about Hereford. Nobody is breeding Hereford in Zimbabwe today. I'm a council member in Zimbabwe Headbook ZHB. and other breeders will testify what I'm saying. Lots of breeds have got no breeders. I don't think we have a limousine breeder. If we have, it could be a breeder who's got just 20 or 30 animals, which is just nothing for the Zimbabwean economy. So the vacuum that was created by the land reform gives us that huge opportunity to say, we need to bring these genetics here. We need to breed them because they already existed in this country and they did very well. They just didn't exist. They did very well. You know, the Herefords, the Limousin, the Charolais, whatever breed they want to do. But the market is there because Zimbabwe is the market.
So would you say then this diversity or genetic a gap, as it were, that you talk about, could it be the reason that maybe farmers quickly run to having Brahman, because like Brahman is become the household real name?
Yeah, people love Brahman. They love it. But at the end of the day, it's not about the ears. It's not about the color of the animal, the skin color. It's about the real beef production that we're talking about. When it comes to real work about producing beef, the Brahman is none of those animals that will produce beef. It's a beautiful animal. I agree with you. It's a lovely animal, but a very temperamental animal as well. So you want to, once it's very good that a lot of people are using Brahman today because they're getting the frame on the animals. Now, when you've got the frame, the Brahman frame, and then you put Simmental on whatever Brahman crosses you have, now you're producing beef. You understand the point? So it's very important to understand that it's very important to have lots of Brahman breeders and change all the animals to almost Brahman type animals. And then we bring these genetics to then fix the beef and the milk on those animals that you'll have produced.
Would you then recommend that, farmers should actually crossbreed, like our indigenous, cattle with the exotics?
We are already doing a lot of programs, for your own information. We are already doing a lot of programs with institutions like Matopo Research, the agricultural colleges. We donate bulls for free. We give semen to communal farmers for free from our Siemental animals so they can improve their heads and understand what we're talking about. So a lot of people will talk about dystocia issues, that they will not calve, difficulties in calving, but it's not true, because this is why we're working with those institutions and with colleges, so that the students that come from these colleges will tell you, we've used the Simmental bull on corner cows and they've given birth in the paddocks. So the calves grow when they are born, not inside the stomach. So it's a lot of work that we're doing. We've got a project running in Chinoi. If you know John Crawford, they are doing 4BX, or is it called 4BX? Yeah, 4BX. They're using Simmental, Angus, and other bulls to cross the indigenous cattle and see how they perform. So if you can be able to sit down with him and get results of what they're doing, you'll see how amazing the results are. You can improve these cattle so easily by just using the bulls to do the crossbreeding. But as Biano Farm, we're doing a lot of work on that. We've also been, the past 2 weeks, I've been working with the Ministry of Youth. Last Friday, the other Friday, I was in Mvuma at a youth farm there in Mvuma, where we were looking at their cattle and seeing how we can collaborate with them and get to improve their heads. So we've offered them 50 straws of semen, which they're going to draw from us and inseminate their cattle and see how the animals go. We're working also with the vocational training center here in Skodini. There's a youth vocational training center. We are working with them. We've donated semen with them, and those are programs that we are doing as Biano Simmentals. So we do a lot of work with farmers across and institutions across the country, where we're trying to say, let's get these heads improved. Let's see how we can improve our beef industry, because at the end of the day, it's an industry that we're looking at, and we want to see a lot of work effort being put in the industry to improve these heads.
Wonderful. There you are, farmers. My guest today was Obert Chinhamo, a cattle breeder. Particularly, he's breeding Siemental heads at Mbiano Farm. There's an opportunity for farmers to go into cattle breeding and using pedigree, animals like the Simmental. This was Asake Online. Join us next time for our next episode on Agriculture on Site. And remember to follow us on our social media platforms at CITE ZW.